Well, I think Simon always swears by
Just leave it. I'm not going to touch that. Yeah, that's got everything. It's not coming off. I give it a little bit of a bump.
So,
Just drop his front foot. Let's find out the exact time.
Break the tab into a new.
Quick resolution is one too. My resolution. I went into the representation of
I'm just gonna leave that. Is that alright?
you can do the first three ways.
I just don't want to fuck with it.
Oh, yeah, that's His fingers kind of itchy, but yeah, really nice time. Understandable.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I actually got over when I was there.
I was saying at wedding, and I was like, I really need to filter. No, it really always makes me like I said,
We'll get started in a couple of minutes, so if you need another drink before proceedings get started, now's your chance. It's been a bit of a comedy of errors so far tonight with technology. But I think we've got everything sorted now. Unfortunately, the pizzas are going to arrive at the wrong time, which is the right time because it's almost now, so we're going to get fed early. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction of the night, and then hopefully the pizzas will all arrive while I'm talking, grab some food, and then we'll get Luke up to do his thing. If you haven't been to a Hacks Hackers before, welcome. If you don't know what it is, it's a worldwide community that's looking at the kind of the nexus of technology and journalism or storytelling. And we meet once a month here in Brisbane to talk about exactly that. It's quite a broad topic. So I think this is our 4th this year, and we're doing one every month until November, and we're keen to keep it going for next year as well. It's a community-based organisation, and it really relies on everybody's participation in the community. We rely on people for help and speeches. So if you can do any of these things on the screen, we'd be really grateful if you want to take part in kind of the organisation level of this, or participate in other ways, volunteering to help at the door or help with the drinks or help with whatever. If you want to present, that would be amazing. We love presenters. We're still looking for someone for next month, so please come up and say hello. Even if you don't want to do it next month, but you think you've got a good story to tell or you want to talk about something interesting, please come up and say hello. If you can provide support in any other way, sponsorship, or participate online. So speaking of that, we've got a few different spaces that you can participate online with us. First of all, the ubiquitous Twitter account and hashtag, so if you're tweeting tonight or if you just want to get in touch at any time. And we've also got a little community on Slack, which is, I mean, it's a global community, but it's sort of focused on Australia and New Zealand. There's quite a few people in there that are big into data and big into storytelling with technology. And there's a dedicated Brisbane room, which is a bit of a ghost town, so if you want to come in and join us. But the general chat is really lively, and there's lots of people there talking about lots of fun things. Next meetup, as I said, is it's worth noting that there's actually a reschedule. Normally it's the 4th Wednesday of every month. Next month we've been bumped for a radio event in this space, so we're going to be on the 5th Wednesday of June, which is the 29th. So if you are a potential speaker, come and see me. As I said, we're still looking for someone. A huge thank you to our sponsors. We've got 3 solid sponsors we've had now for a few months. Hub 4101 for event support. They support us in a bunch of different ways, but we really value their support in helping organise and get things together. The ABC, obviously, for the venue, a really great venue which we've loved having the use of, and even though their projector wasn't on song tonight, they did kindly provide us with a backup, so that's good as well. And ThoughtWorks are paying tonight for your food and drinks, so a huge thank you to them as well. All right. Luke Bacon is our presenter tonight. He's from the OpenAustralia Foundation. Hi Luke, there he is. It looks like our pizzas still aren't here, but 5 minutes away.
What a live tracker.
Technology.
What an age.
Storytelling. But Luke's going to be talking tonight about his work mostly with OpenAustralia and mostly to do with web scrapers. They have a product called morph.io, which you can look up, which is a website, essentially, a web service that will allow you to run scrapers on a periodic basis. And I've used it for a bunch of things. I used it just last week to get a mapping of postcodes to electorates, which the AEC kindly provides on their website, but will not give us a data file for, because apparently they don't pay Australia Post for the postcode file. Or they do pay it, but Australia Post won't let them share it. So we can solve that problem really easily with web scraping, and Luke's going to tell us all about the fun that can be had with web scraping. And after he's done kind of a presentation on that and some of his other work with OpenAustralia Foundation, he's going to attempt, I think, some live scraping. It's hard to tell with all the technology gremlins we've had so far tonight. But now I'll just pass it back to the room for a few minutes. Grab another drink if you want. I'm going to shove some more beers in the cold ice bucket, and there'll be some pizzas arriving any minute now. 2 minutes, and then we'll get started with Luke's presentation. So thanks very much for coming.
Yeah, if you go, presentation will be down the bottom.
Yeah. This way. This is presentation.
Oh, is it? Oh, it's here. Yeah.
Oh wait, maybe if I go. No. Mine's got like.
Yeah, that's right. That's fine. Cool. Yeah, I've had a play with it. I haven't seriously used it in kind of like absolute like serious research fashion, but yeah, it's an interesting one. We have lots of researchers like you research. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So no, it's interesting. It's one of those ones they're trying to figure out what do actually use this for. They've like had it naked and everything like that. And it's kind of like give it some sense.
Sure as they were, 2 minutes. So grab some pizza and we'll be started before you know it.
How do you get through the questions and stuff? Come up with choose the questions. Pretty involved process because with the ABC partners with the University of Melbourne on it. Yep. So a group of data scientists and social scientists who are based in Canada. So the first thing we do is go out to see totally non-scientific, just went for way, what was important to them in the upcoming election. So we got all that information, and that was used for basic subject areas and themes coming out of that. The ABC, we provided some like editorial input, like what we think is interesting, what we think is going to be a topic of debate in the election. And the academic panel come up with about 100 propositions. They actually go through the process of coding or placing where the party's views are on each one of those. Sure. Okay. And they put them out to what they call a pilot study, so they give them to, I'm not sure what the exact figure is, but somewhere between 10 and 20,000 people, I think. And that helps to, that actually helps to fine tune what the focus of the art, because it's based on how the questions are to know what the kind of, how the questions set out the landscape of the compass, if that makes sense. Yep. That actually you get a lot of like yeah, we get a good stuff, we get everything from doesn't work. Using lots of questions about why am I
Okay, everybody, I think we're going to get started. If you want to take your pizza to your seat. Simon can wrangle those people.
I'll wrangle, yeah.
Okay, let's get started. Got quite a bit to get through. My name's Luke Bacon. I work at the OpenAustralia Foundation as, I think my business cards say designer, but increasingly it's just all-round hacker, doing all kinds of stuff. Thank you so much to Simon for inviting us up here to present.
Thank you for coming.
We're normally based in Sydney, so it's a real pleasure to be in Brisbane for a couple of days. I'd also really love to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're on and acknowledge their elders past and present and emerging and anyone who is in the room. The joy of web scraping. So I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of the OpenAustralia Foundation and what we do and how it's involved with web scraping, because it turns out basically everything we do involves web scraping. But there's a lot of tools in there that I think are going to be useful for hacks and hackers generally. And can you please tell me if this mic starts going on and off, because I can't really hear it. It is? Should I just ditch it? Is that better?
Yeah, maybe.
Is that better? Yes? No? Matthew, can you hear me still? All right. I'm just going to turn this off.
There are a few seats at the front, guys, if you did want to move down.
Yeah, cool. All right. So let me tell you a little bit about the OpenAustralia Foundation. We are a very small non-profit that runs about 7 major projects that are used by about 120 or something thousand people every month across Australia. And our projects are hacking democracy. So we see our goal as trying to transform democracy in Australia and help people who are trying to make our society better. That sounds pretty vague. To get a little bit more specific, this is something Matthew said once that I thought was quite spot on and a good way to describe it, that kind of democracy in politics, but not as you know it, and I might say without the boring bits in some ways. Who here kind of sees themselves as interested in politics or democracy? A lot of people. This is a bit of a stacked audience. Who doesn't? Who's kind of like, I'm not that into it? Yeah. I think if you, particularly outside of this room, out there, I spoke at another meetup last night that was Ruby programmers, and there were a lot of people who weren't interested. And their feedback was that they see it as this thing that it has nothing to do with their lives. It's these people away in Canberra who are just arguing, and it's a drama that doesn't really impact them, and they have no way of impacting it themselves, and that it's this really kind of frustrating experience for them. Our view of politics is a bit broader, and probably a lot of people in this room share the idea that it's more about situations where, has anyone ever been driving on the freeway and they've missed a turn-off because there was absolutely no sign there? I had that experience. And it's about us in the world and the things that we observe that could be better, and our decision-making collectively and fixing those things. Over the last couple of days, I've got to spend quite a bit of time in the Edge over at Brisbane, Queensland State Library, which is such a stunning building and space. But the Edge is full of all these great people doing all kinds of stuff, and to have that public space on the water there is such a really, really fantastic thing that I'm sure was really hard fought and continues to be hard fought. And that's the politics that's impacted my life the last few days, and that's kind of what we're interested in. So we run projects that look at the politics in Australia and democracy and look at the problems, because like any design system, there are lots of problems, there are lots of bugs in our democracy, and we produce projects that try and fix a little part of that problem, little experiments that are trying to fix this small slice, and we put it out there. So these are some of our projects, and I'm going to go through some of them tonight, this kind of in rough order from the oldest to the newest. OpenAustralia.org was made, I think, in 2007, 2008. So we've been around for quite a while, and a lot of people still use that project. This is one of our latest projects, though, They Vote For You, which kind of does what it says on the tin, that it tells you how your MPs are voting on the issues that matter to you. It's based around the idea that we hear a lot of news from the political media about what politicians are saying all the time, but when we actually vote for them and elect them, as we're going to do shortly, we're actually hiring them in a sense, or electing them, to go and represent us in Parliament and vote on law which will impact our lives. So it's the actual voting that we're saying is important in this project. And so we've done quite a bit of work to get together, look at all those votes and give a really high level kind of simplistic overview that is quite useful to people, that is kind of quite relevant, they can understand, of how an MP has actually voted in Parliament rather than what they've said. Do I have another look at this? Yes, and so we can see here this person who I just popped in the postcode for where we are, and this is the MP for the area that we're in today. And this is how they vote on a range of policies. So they vote very strongly for decreasing ABC and SBS funding, better watch out. And then here's some of the other policies that they've voted on in different ways. And we have pages like this that is a specific policy, and you can go and see how lots of MPs have voted. So web scraping. You might notice on this page there's a lot of information about different MPs and a lot of images of MPs. And there are a lot of MPs in Parliament. And it would be very, very frustrating and boring and error-prone if we had to manually go to the Parliament's website and collect each of those images. And I'm sure we've all done that, of going to a website, copying, pasting something out again and again and again into a spreadsheet or whatever you're working on. So web scraping is a little bit of code so you don't have to do what computers do really well. Computers are really good at doing specific things repetitively, following orders. Humans are good at improvising and creativity and thinking and stuff like that, and not particularly good at repetitive actions and doing repetitive actions without error. So scrapers are a little bit of code to help us do that. And specifically, we write a little bit of code to go to a website, get information off it, and save it for us. Who here is a developer, is a kind of programmer? Some people? Who here is like learning to program? Has anyone here ever used jQuery? That's kind of a common thing. Has anyone ever written HTML who doesn't see themselves as a programmer? Cool. Does anyone here work with programmers in their day job? Does anyone here do research or work with information in their jobs? Basically everyone. So web scraping is relevant to all of you in different ways, and I'm going to give a bit of an overview of what it's good for. And I think people who are programmers, who are maybe have already done some web scraping, they might get ideas about different things they can do with it, or things that can save them time. People who aren't programmers can understand, if I can just get the person a few offices down and they can help me with this, I can save a huge amount of time, just understanding the possibilities. Web scraping is also a really, really great way to learn programming. I have personally found it a great way to improve my programming because it's very, very simple and very easy programming, but you're dealing with really real-world problems of people's terrible websites that they've made. So it's quite good for that. To dive in super deep immediately, I actually just wanted to show you a little bit of what a web scraper looks like. So this is only 13 lines of code, and you might even be able to read, because it's quite simple, what this is actually doing. So, and I'm going to get slightly technical for a second. So firstly, these bits at the top, we're requiring some libraries. So we say, we just want to get some other tools from some other people and use this in this little bit of code. And then this mechanized new get this web page. That's saying, go get that web page for us and bring it back, because we want to look at it in this code. And we can see we're getting the ABC News for Queensland. And then we have our page, and on the page, at the article index, search for all the list items. And then for each of those list items, let's create an article, which is an object that has a heading and a URL. And for the heading, let's get the bit from the heading of that list item, and let's get the text out of it. And for the URL, let's look at the anchor or the link, if you're familiar with HTML, inside the heading, and we'll get the hypertext reference, and that's the URL. So some of that might be quite familiar to a lot of people. And then this bit is we're calling back on this Scraper Wiki library from up the top, and we're saying save this data. And SQLite is a database format that you may or may not be familiar with, and we're basically saving that article. So this is a scraper that goes to the ABC's website, looks at the list of articles, saves them all, and saves the heading and the URL of them. And it's just 13 lines of code. If you ran that today at about 3:30, this is what you would get. So this is just that data. That kind of makes a little bit of sense to people, that we have this code, and then it produces this for us. So before we get into web scraping is really, Hanari, who I work with, and I disagree. I think it's really fun, and he thinks I'm a kind of masochist, but I'll say this. So before you dive into web scraping, because it is writing code and it does take a little bit of time, there are other things that can be a much better way to get by. One of those things is copy and paste. So if there's just like normal HTML table on a website, or just a table that you might be familiar with, often you can just copy and paste that into Excel, and you've got data and it works fine. Lots of typing can work. So I did a project before I was with the OpenAustralia Foundation called Detention Logs, where we published 9,000 incidents from Australia's immigration detention centres online. And our data source was this PDF that we got from the immigration department that we wish we could have scraped, and we sent it to lots of people to help us scrape, but in the end they couldn't, so we manually retyped 9,000 lines of PDF spreadsheet over a few thousand hours. So that is possible, and a lot of us probably have experience with lots of typing. There are good things about lots of typing as well, that by reading about 4,000 incidents of spreadsheet, I understood that data in a way that I wouldn't if I had just scraped it, so I think that's something relevant to think about. Asking politely is always a good technique. Often people, if you just say, hey, particularly with government data, you call them and say, have you got this stuff in an Excel? It's not on your website. And they go, yeah, here it is, no worries. And they give it to you. Sometimes if you're asking for incidents from immigration detention, they don't do that. But I had a good experience with that last week where the West Australian government don't have on their website a list of all their local councillors, like some of the other states, which we had scraped. And so I emailed them and I said, do you have this in the spreadsheet? And they said, absolutely, here it is. And I said, do you mind if I publish this on the web? They said, no worries, so that was good. Using pre-existing structured data. So often you'll go and say, oh, I really need this data. You go to the website you're going to scrape it from, and you're like, oh, I'm going to scrape it, it's going to be really great. Meanwhile, someone else has already scraped it, or it's already available on data.gov.au or something like that. And go and reuse their data. Don't rewrite your own scraper if you can possibly avoid it. Often, it's not there, but do have a look. And finally, freedom of information requests. Who's familiar with freedom of information as kind of a concept? A lot of people. So those are rights that we all have in Australia, or a system that we can access to ask the government for information, and they basically have to give it to you within some kind of constraints. We run a project called Right to Know that helps you make freedom of information requests. And it makes it really easy because there are a few hard things about freedom of information, and one of them is, who do I email? What do I need to say to them? What's the format of all this? When they reply no, what can I do? Stuff like that. And this system makes that really, really easy. And I really encourage you to go and have a look at examples like this. So Ben has asked the Minister of Arts for Catalyst, which is one of Australia's arts funding grant systems, for all the projects since the fund's initiation. And you can see this request was partially successful, so he got some of that information from them. That isn't online anywhere, and it would have been really hard to get, and now it is online on Right to Know, and you can go look at that request and get all the information. Okay, often all those avenues don't work, and you have to write a web scraper. So who scrapes the web? This is Jeremy Bowers, who's a journalist in the New York Times Interactive team. This is a tweet he did last year saying that web scraping is the original data journalism skill, because it's such a flexible skill that lets you do so many things on so many projects and get information for stories. In fact, his editor replied to this tweet saying, it is absolutely one of the core skills with FOI and something else. So we've got you covered, data journalists. Researchers, university researchers, anyone researching anything often finds information on the web. And this is an example of something somebody is scraping that is air quality levels in Hong Kong. As you can see, there's a lot of pages here, and the latest one, 2005, is updated every week, I think, with information. It would be very, very boring to go back to that page every week and collect the information on it, and you might forget. So it's really, really helpful to write a little bit of software to go and do that for you. How can scraping help you? Scraping is really great for tracking when things change. This is an example, one of our projects, we have this vanity stats that aren't particularly meaningful, but it's an interesting thing to give us an idea of how many people are using this project. And these change every day. And I was like, what were they like 3 months ago? Or is this different than it was before? And we didn't really have an easy way of finding out. And it took me a few minutes to write a scraper that just goes and gets this every day and just saves it for us. And so we can look back in the future. So just something like that I'm like, I want to actually keep track of this thing that isn't going to be, I'm not going to be able to look on this website to see what this was last week. So I just wrote a little scraper to do that. Archiving. I love archiving and archives and libraries, and I found web scraping a really fantastic kind of punk archivist tool. This is the New South Wales e-tendering contracts register. And in New South Wales, you might have heard we had a lot of issues with corruption. And so I think it was 2011, or maybe a little bit earlier, we passed these amazing new laws to make government really transparent called GIPA. We amended it, and one of those things was the government has to put up all their contracts because ICAC, the Independent Commission of Corruption, identified contracting is a key place where when money is passing around, it's a key place that corruption happens. So the government must put up all their contracts. and the contracts will be publicly accessible, so the public can scrutinize these trades or these deals, and the public will be able to view these as long as the contract is active, so until the end of the contract, or 40 days. And after that, they can't look at the contracts. So for the public to actually scrutinize the government in that way, they would have to know that a deal needed to be looked at while the contract was going on. The contract might be 41 days long. So it's very, very difficult, and you can't look at previous contracts, even for existing projects. So for example, with WestConnex, biggest infrastructure project in Australia, there is no public access to any of the contracts that have already ended on that project. It's a massive multi-year project, so you basically can't get the information. I got very interested in WestConnex because I grew up in the area that's going through, and just wrote a quick scraper that goes to Roads Maritime Services Department every day and gets all the contracts. And so now, while on their website you can only get them all the current contracts, I've got all the data going back to last March for all the contracts on there. Okay, so that's a really, really good use of scraping, I would say. Alerting you of changes. We have comments on one of our projects, and I had to do a bit of moderation on one of them, and I wanted to know if there was new comments on one of these pages, because if there was a new comment, I wanted to go and look at it and moderate it. We didn't have a good way to do that within the project, so I just wrote a little scraper that said, go to this page, and if the number is 4, don't worry about it, all good. But if the number's 5, if there's a new comment, break and send me an email. And so that was just a good way to remind me, I need to go look at this, that something's changed, because if I'm just trying to write myself notes, go back there every day, I'm going to miss something. So I don't have to think about that anymore, the scraper handles it. So that's kind of little examples that were kind of thrown together, but scraping also drives massive projects. Like the Google search engine is crawling all over the web, indexing websites. That's a form of web scraping. Have people heard of the Internet Archive? So that's a form of web scraping. Lots and lots of projects, and it drives our biggest project. Our biggest project, or most popular project, is Planning Alerts. About 40,000 people use it. Has anyone ever seen some development happening on their block, and they've said, their favorite pub gets knocked down, or some block of flats go up, or something like that, and they think, I had no idea that was going on, because people don't read the letters that they get notifying them, or in Queensland I've heard you don't get notified for a lot of things, like in South Australia. We think of all the problems in the planning system, one of those problems is people don't know what's happening. And so we have this project that will, instead of you get a letter, you get an email about the development application. And a lot of people are interested in that. This is what those emails kind of look like. So there's this development happening in the street here. These people want a liquor license for a single function, the Newtown Good Food Fair. And there's something else happening in Church Street in Newtown. People can also comment on development applications, and those comments are sent to council as submissions, so we're also making participation in the planning system really easy. And this is what those comments look like. Joe says, this is a great event, so nutritious and fun. More of the same, please. So planning, can actually be this fun, positive thing, rather than everyone just saying no all the time. So we like that. There's also a website where you can go and look at a map and a little bit more about development applications. And here you can comment on DAs. Oh, which reminds me, maybe remind me at the end to come back for this treasure hunt, that I don't want to leave Brisbane without something. And you can help. And scraping can't. So this is just the coverage page on Planning Alerts that explains what parts of the country we cover. And we cover development applications within 146 planning authorities all around Australia, which covers 60% of the population. Do you think 146 councils have a standard data format that they publish development applications in, or a nice data feed, or they email us spreadsheets of applications? No. So we scrape 146 planning authorities to get the DAs off their website, and that drives planning alerts. That's a huge amount of scraping, by a 2-person full-time organisation standards. And we also get a lot of contributions from volunteers. In fact, volunteers are doing most of the work fixing those scrapers at the moment, and contributing new scrapers, which is fantastic. That's a very hard thing to manage. So there is a backstory that I'm not going to go into because we don't have time, but we built Morph, specifically Matthew built Morph over Christmas, and we continue to develop it. The Morph takes the hassle out of web scraping. Web scraping, that little bit of code I showed before, is quite simple, but there are some things around web scraping that aren't as simple. Like, where are you going to run your scraper? Going to run it on your computer, or are you going to run it on an external server somewhere, and you're going to set those things up? Are you going to run that scraper daily or at different times, and how are you going to set that up? I don't know how to do some of these things. How are you going to find out when your scraper breaks? How are you going to get alerted about those things? Like these questions about kind of server administration, and they're quite tricky. Also, how are you going to access the data from your scraper? How are you going to save it and then make it available to yourself, particularly if you're using it in a big service like planning alerts? So Morph takes the hassle, all those things, away from web scraping, and you can just focus on scraping and using the data that you want. There's about 5,000 scrapers on Morph. It's been up online for almost 2 years, or about 2 years. We run it, or we run all our scrapers on it, so all the planning alert scrapers are running on there, but there's about 5,000 other scrapers on there now, and 5,000 users from all around the world. People are scraping fire incidents, bushfires in the Czech Republic, upcoming legislation in the Chilean parliament, postcodes in Slovakia. We're scraping buildings that are planned to be built or being knocked down in Australia. It archives New South Wales police media releases that you can't get after a month online. People are scraping the air quality data in Hong Kong. I think some office in the UN are using it to scrape their own website for troop deployments in different places. Someone's scraping their favorite black metal, depressive black metal, heavy metal, and experimental death metal bands. And every record ever played on the BBC Desert Island Discs. So you can scrape all kinds of stuff, and lots of people are using Morph to do that. Let me show you a little bit more about Morph. So you log in, and one of the nice things is it tells you about all your broken scrapers, and it will email you about that, so you don't have to worry about alerts. One of the really fantastic things is the search that we built into it. So, and back to that idea of don't scrape if someone else has done it or the data is there. There is 5,400 scrapers in Morph. All of their data is publicly available for you to use. And you can search by terms, or you can actually search by domain names as well. So you can put in qld.gov.au and look at all the scrapers that are scraping Queensland government websites, things like that. These are some of the new users from Morph. Hanari, my colleague, just gave a talk in Taiwan, and so a lot of new users throughout Asia have just joined, which is fantastic. And this is just to give you a little idea of the scale of it. So this in the last week, it scraped almost 1 million web pages, produced 3 million rows of data, and 100,000 downloads from the API. So Morph is being used by people. One of the fantastic things about Morph is it enables collaboration on scrapers, and that's so important for us in particular because we run a big platform that has so many scrapers that we need volunteers to work on them. But it also means that if you're learning to scrape, you can go and look at all the code in all the scrapers and just take their code and reuse it. I'm sure all the scrapers are open source basically. This is an example of Daniel and a few other people who are volunteers who work on our projects are talking about the Newcastle development applications, and which is actually scraping PDFs, which is really, really nasty, but they're doing a great job because this issue is closed. Are people familiar with GitHub? Some people probably will be, some people won't be. GitHub is this really amazing code sharing platform on the web that basically most open source code is now hosted on. And for anyone who's interested in this stuff, I would really recommend getting familiar with GitHub and looking at some projects because it's a fantastic way to manage and collaborate on code projects. Another great thing about Morph, particularly for beginners, or if you're like me and you're really lazy, is whenever you make a new scraper, you get this template that basically has all the kind of code you need in it to scrape something. So if you're just getting started, that's really, really helpful. This is an example of the template in the Ruby programming language. but you can also scrape on Morph in JavaScript, Python, PHP, or Perl are all supported. So however you like. And this is the example. So it has some of that require those libraries, go get the page, an example of saving data that we looked at before. That's all in the template. It has a concept of organizations within Morph, so you can have scrapers that a number of people have ownership over and share. So this is the Planning Alert scrapers, 157, and that's some of the people, those are just the people who have kind of access to change all that code, but there are other people who are collaborating and suggesting changes and stuff like that. This is an example of a scraper on Morph. So this is the Planning Alert scraper for Perth, and it is broken. And it tells you, if you're familiar with Ruby at all, or any programming language, that's the error. And it's actually telling you why it broke and where the line of code was that broke. So that's really, really helpful to go and fix it. Because it might just be that the URL changed of the website you were trying to scrape or something like that. We can also see down here, you can access the data from this scraper. And you can see who's been downloading it and then go and collaborate with them, which is nice. But you can access all that data in a CSV file, which is a spreadsheet file. So you can go to any scraper and download all the data in it and open it up in Excel or Google Spreadsheets or whatever. You can download it as an SQLite database, which is a simple database format. Or you can access the API, which there's a JSON API if people are familiar with JSON for doing all kinds of crazy API stuff, and you can run queries against all of it in SQL. This is getting a little bit technical, but it's very, very flexible. There's actually a project, the Chilean, I think it's the Chilean Parliament project that shows information about what's happening in Parliament in Chile. They use Morph as the database of their project. So every time you go to a web page, it goes to Morph and says, hey, are there any new votes in Parliament on this day? And then it goes and gets them and brings them back. So Morph is super flexible. Did I mention that it sends you an email when things break? So that's how I was doing that little scraper that said, go to the page, and if the number of comments is 3, all good. If it's 4 or 5, break, and then send me an email. So I'm kind of leveraging, or it's a terrible word, or using that functionality in Morph to help me out. We are a tiny organization running all these projects that are used by a lot of people around the world. We have 2 full-time staff and a bunch of 2 or 3 part-time staff, including a parliamentary researcher who is researching federal parliament and working on Their Vote For You, and a whole host of volunteers and people who are programmers or researchers who just care about democracy in Australia and around the world and are helping out. But we get about half to 2/3 of our funding from donations from people. And we're about to run a donation drive, and leading up to the end of financial year, we are a registered charity. On Morph specifically, this is a bit different to just general donations, but we set it up as something that people can support. We're not sure if we will ever kind of make it, any of it commercial, or maybe we will, maybe we won't, but a lot of it will always be free for everybody. So these people, some of them are the people who developed the project, but some of them are people using it. So My Society are the much bigger UK version of our organisation. They use Morph heavily for a number of their projects, so they're supporters. These are all other wonderful people who are developers on it, and also people who just want to help out, and other people supporting. You might know Frederick Prudo, he did a lot of work on the Panama Papers. DJ Ken Cloud is at SBS, and Edmund is Financial Review, so lots of data journalists in Australia and overseas using the projects. That's kind of the joy of web scraping. I hope that I think went on quite long, but that's good. That's a really high-level overview of how we're using scraping in our big projects, but also in really little day-to-day things that can help us out. There are tutorials online, and I'll put up on Hackers some links to resources that you can use if you're interested in learning. But go and explore Morph and just search for scrapers on there and see what you think. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. What's happening now, Sam?
Good question. Questions? Yeah, let's start with questions, I think. Anybody got any questions for Luke?
There's a lot of information.
Yeah, you explained it all too well, obviously.
Just one of it.
Go for it.
So, what are the legal
Good question. Somebody, we were on a meetup in Sydney and someone did a whole little talk on the legality of scraping. So remember, scraping is something that most organisations who are building web applications do all the time. It's not like a devious or kind of mischievous thing. Most people who put information on their websites want people to look at it and use it. There are potential copyright, issues if you're doing something, if you're like logging into someone's website and taking information that other people pay for and pulling it out. Like I would say that's probably a really bad idea. If you're scraping a website in a way that actually damages that website or that server or is harmful to those people, I would say that's a really bad idea, and they might not like that, and maybe they will come after you in some way. But generally, it's the way that Google indexer works is it goes to websites and looks at all the information of it and pulls stuff out. The way people use screen readers or a whole range of assisted technologies use the web is they have a piece of software that breaks down the page and pulls out the bits that are interesting and reads it to them. That is a form of scraping. So just because a computer is using the page, not a human, doesn't automatically make it kind of a devious thing. But yeah, that probably doesn't really answer your question. I don't know of like a specific law that. Yeah.
So I can think of a couple of examples where an organisation put in the effort to compile that information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Say gig guides.
Yeah.
I know that people would scrape a gig guide that I worked on.
Yeah.
And so we would just see that with fake news so that we can then go search and see who's taking the data.
Yeah.
So you can, there is data, there is work that goes into it that you pay people to do. So you've got an interest in protecting it and not being reused. There might be other information that you do want to spread.
Yeah.
So government information, we want it to go out there and do it, so you make it available for those reasons.
Exactly. So there are lots of illegal sites online that just aggregate news sites or aggregate magazines and stuff like that, and they work with scrapers as well. They're just pulling all the articles off those websites and republishing that on their own website. Exactly like we do with DAs and planning alerts. And yeah, that's absolutely copyright violation, and if we found someone doing that on Morph, we would kick them off Morph because exactly.
Obviously, a site that is a media site or is attracting people for advertising, then
Yeah.
you want that content in it. But if it's something that wants to get the message out, it's a publicity site or a PR site or a bank that wants to get their stuff known, or that is government wants a message out there.
There is a gigantic phrase that was in this,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like the DAs on planning alerts are a perfect example.
Yeah.
Right? Because every single scraper clicks the button, like the scraper clicks the button saying, I will not be distributed or copy this data.
Yeah.
Because every single council has that on their planning portal.
Yeah.
Right. But the truth is that nobody actually did. Right?
Not only do they.
Right, but it's still, there's still a disclaimer that says you shouldn't copy this data. But clearly there is a moral thing underneath it, right? And that's what OpenAustralia depends on to do the job.
If the government website didn't have any idea or think about the implications of copyright,
Exactly.
actually going, hang on, this
Yeah.
is public information that we want people to know. They just went, I spent time on this, I don't.
Yeah, and or even the person working with that software vendor, they said, would you like this terms and conditions page on your website? And they said, yes please, tick that box, and that's what it is. Yeah.
As a blanket copyright statement, it doesn't actually say the name.
Exactly. And the government, all the different governments in Australia don't hate us or anything like that. Like lots of local councils tweet about how much they love planning alerts and link to planning alerts on their websites and stuff like that. So even though we are clicking I agree on their website and
There
things.
hasn't been, in the entire history of planning alerts, right? There hasn't been a single council that has complained about the information being published.
Yeah.
on
And I guess the message around the legal stuff is if you're taking information that you think is was intended to be public, don't feel like you're going to get a knock on the door from ASIO or something for scraping because everyone does it. Don't go and break the law intentionally, kids. Don't take drugs. Yeah. There's another question down here.
Yeah, I guess I was going to add into that. From an academic kind of research perspective, we do a lot of scraping of news content, right, for kind of journalism studies research. And it's really interesting. I mean, with these tools, we can generate you get hundreds of thousands of news articles, which is, legally the copyright of that news organisation that's published the material. Now, at the same time as we're doing that, it's kind of okay, I guess, because we're just using it, we're publishing a paper, and we're giving some kind of précis of what is it we've found within that. We're not republishing the actual articles in full or anything like that. But at the same time, within academia, there's this push for open data. And so the idea of, you publish all your data sets. Now, in instances where you've got, say, human participants, you can kind of legitimately say, I can't publish this. This is sensitive medical information or health research data. But when it comes to that kind of data, it's a harder thing to kind of argue against for a journal to say, no, we can't publish this, what was at a time a publicly available news content. And it's kind of this you're drawn between this copyright infringement issue and this open data kind of issue on the other hand. So it's really quite a difficult time. You've kind of got this beautiful tool available to you to do amazing research to advance our understanding of the news process, but you're kind of hamstrung in that, in a way, you can't actually do it unless you can also give over all the data that led you to those conclusions. So.
But isn't like all that Morph is doing in that instance when you write a scraper, it's just taking information that's available in one form, just making it slightly, just changing the form of that information to make it slightly more usable for research or analysis, right? And yes, you are republishing it, but you're not fundamentally kind of it's still just making the stuff available that was available before, right? And in that sense, there's a more, I think underlying it, there's a moral component, right? If you're doing research, you have a moral obligation to be able to, for other people to verify your work, and to do that you should be able to publish the stuff that you
Yeah, and we do, and we totally skirt the line, right? I mean,
and that's good, right? Because you're pointing the debate in the right direction, right? You're making people rethink their assumptions rather than just going, ooh, copyright, ooh, I can't touch that, right? And if that's the way the world will go, we'll end up in a really bad place. Like we need to be able to do research, we need to be able to share things, and we need to redefine the nature of it.
No, I wondered if there were any copyright lawyers in the room because even if you were sued for breach of copyright, the quantum of what you'd be sued for would be the commercial value of what you took, which if it's news 6 months later after you've been doing it, sell it. So I'm thinking, what would they sue for?
Yeah, I know.
Well,
How much
the
would they
reality
sue
is
for?
that they go, please take it down, and we go, yeah, okay, sure.
So a lot of people who publish content, even if it's not copyright, are using it to drive advertising.
Mm.
And so, I guess everybody's got really upset because we've been taking content and they're getting advertising revenue and then they're republishing it somewhere where they're not.
Yeah, I've never scraped anything that's generating advertising revenue. Just because, it doesn't particularly. I'm interested in, access to public information, and so I've never felt that need, and we've never had anyone. So I haven't scraped news sites, but I'd be interested in because I do think there's
Even if
some
you were,
important
if you're not using it to make commercial value.
Yeah, on.
Arguably taking away.
No, I'm
Yeah.
just taking my audience.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think this tension exists ever since the photocopier was invented. There is this, copying is really useful, but it's legally a grey area. Hash, can't remember her last name, but did a fantastic talk at our meetup in Sydney that all the slides are available online. She actually is a lawyer and tried to go through it kind of meticulously and say, this legally is very interesting, and she did quite a practical thing for scrapers. Is this something you need to worry about? And I encourage her to go and actually have a look at it, because she was saying do not do this and do not do that. If you're doing this big range of things, you're all good, and everyone's going to be happy, and if someone complains, do this, and that's cool. And it's quite, yeah, there's a lot of good information there, I would say. Yes.
What do websites do to make scraping difficult? I noticed that Facebook seems to randomize their DOM element classing
Yeah.
to make that really hard.
I think Google's search do a bit of work to try and stop people scraping it, though they themselves have teams of people who just do scraping. But yeah, that's their game. That's power.
They have an entire team dedicated to stopping scraping.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like they use all sorts of AI type stuff, like patterns of click behavior that humans don't do and then they block it.
Yeah.
So because it's friendly for them.
Yeah.
So because they have other search engines that scrape. They have people that scrape Google search specifically for SEO stuff. So they try and undermine that because they don't want to. So there's a good solid reason for doing it.
And I personally have never I've come across, and if you start scraping, you will come across lots of sites that are difficult to scrape because the people who made it didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah, I was about to say
That's the main problem.
It's very rarely
Yeah.
people actively trying to stop scraping. It's more usually incompetent website creators.
Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of those people work for companies hired by our governments. So that's a problem. There are sites that do try and block scraping. There must be a disaster for the accessibility of their sites, and they're probably liable under the Anti-Discrimination Act for not providing access to screen readers and a whole host of technology like that. But they do it, and there are tools that you can use to get around it. Basically, obviously the super high-end Google, good luck. Yeah, I wouldn't even try it. But basically not really.
I did try it. It's very difficult.
Yeah, and people put stuff on the web because they want people to come look at it. Unless they have a lot of money, they're not going to invest money in trying to maybe stop a small portion of people doing something else with it. Yeah, and because it would also destroy their Google ranking. Yeah.
In a political context, because obviously that you deal with a lot of those documents, there's, the example I guess I'm talking about is, say, the politicians' benefits. They have to put these up on the web by law, but at the moment it's like a system of handwritten scanned PDFs.
Yeah.
I mean, have you noticed as Open Australia kind of goes along a bit of a trend of like governments fulfilling their obligations but also making it difficult to obtain that information?
I've found the opposite. I'll ask Matthew to maybe tell a specific story about the Register of Interest in a sec, but before I knew how to do scraping, I was doing this project all about immigration detention, and the immigration department had a web page that was statistics and information about immigration detention, and it had the list every month they do, and they said every week, but they did it every month. They would do a census of how many people were in every immigration detention centre, and then the next month they would take down that and put up the current month, and the next month they would take down, so you could never see historically how it was changing. And so I just started going there. I was the computer. I went there every month and I took the information off. And I went through the Wayback Machine and got a lot of the old stuff. And then I called Sandy Logan, who at the time was the communications person, and I was like, I'd love all of it that you have. And he was running a particular strategy at the time that was like, be nice to journalists. And he said, yeah, here, have it. And he gave me what he said they had, but it was a kind of a small portion of what I already had. And then the next week they started referring journalists to my site, where I was listing historical information. And then from that date on, they have kept all the previous information online. So I think in some ways they just never thought, like, would anyone ever want to see how populations change in immigration detention? Isn't the logical thing to remove all the information we put up there previously? And you just give them this idea and they go, oh, that makes heaps of sense, and they do it. The Register of Interest of federal politicians wasn't online until quite recently. Matthew was deeply involved with this. Am I right? Maybe this is this is the register of interest that
Yeah.
Yeah.
You wanna, I mean, like, tell the story?
I think you probably know the story better than I do.
So, this was kind of.
Matthew is also one of the founders of the OpenAustralia Foundation and doesn't work with us anymore, but he has been around.
So, I think it was like 2007, doing OpenAustralia.org, there was a register of interest. I was like searching, Googling for it, and I couldn't find the damn thing, and I was like, I must like not have my Google flew up, and I just couldn't find the thing, and finally I ended up emailing the registrar, who's like the person in Parliament who looks after this register, which basically, and the register of interest is yeah, it's probably everybody knows, it's like a document that says, you know, every MP has to fill this thing out saying, you know, I have shares in Telstra, or, you know, I have these.
A current example is it hit Labor hard like last week with this 2 point whatever it is $1 million house, right?
Exactly. So it's about you know, showing that you don't have any conflicts with things that can be signed in Parliament, so that, you know, you can be seen to make a fair decision. So very important part of a kind of accountability process, right? It's very important that that's public. So I was like shocked that I couldn't find this. So I mailed the registrar. It turned out that the process for viewing this document was that you had to go to Parliament House when Parliament was sitting, and you could only go between like the hours of 2 and 4 in the afternoon, and you were allowed to go in with a pencil and paper and take notes. You weren't allowed to make photocopies of anything, and that was the transparency of this document, right? Which is a fundamental thing about showing potential conflicts, right?
What year was this?
So this was like 2008 or something, I think, something like that. And I was like, because I didn't know better, I was like, well, how about if you like send me the folder of the entire register, and I will take that and I will scan it, and then I'll put it up on this website that we built. And then to my complete surprise, about 6 months later, we got this gigantic bundle in post. We never got we asked for like, are we allowed to do this? Are you saying this is okay? And like, nothing. It was just like crumbling. So we just went ahead and did it, and we scanned the whole thing, put it up, and then a short time later the Senate sent us a CD-ROM of the entire register of interest as well to the Senate, and we put that up, and then for a good like 4 years or something, we were just regularly sent updates, and we scanned them and put them up on our website, and we were the canonical source for this stuff. Basically every time there was an update, we were doing it, and then about what, 4 years ago maybe something, they finally, like the committee that kind of decides how to do this stuff finally kind of went, okay, we're going to do it ourselves, and they started publishing it on the official.
And just to bring this whole thing full circle, there is now the Guardian Australia, one of the data journalists there, runs a scraper which I'm going to guess is on Morph, because he kind of uses it. He may or may not be, but he runs a scraper to scrape that exact website, the Register of Interest, and has a Twitter bot that tweets every time a politician's Register of Interest is updated.
Yeah.
So that
and I think it was
provides another access point.
It was exactly what you said, though. I think it was like nobody had quite connected the dots. Like, I don't think, I mean, clearly there was an intention in that original process to not actually be transparent with people. But once they realized that they couldn't kind of stop the tide, like, this stuff was going to be available, and it should be available, they went ahead and did it. And the fact that Australia kind of just pushed the envelope a bit and just did it without really getting official permission, kind of made it happen faster. So I think it's a good way to make stuff happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's just been a parliamentary inquiry into voting procedures in the House of Representatives, and specifically looking at electronic voting, which is where lots of countries around the world have a thing where MPs hit a button, and so there's a complete record of how everybody votes. In Australian federal parliament, most votes are held on the voices. It means they go, should we make this law? I say aye, and everyone goes aye, and then some people say no, and they go, I reckon the ayes have it, and then they go, cool, and they don't write down who voted which way or who was in the room. So So you have no way of knowing how your MP voted in most votes in federal parliament. That's the state of our transparency of parliament. Anyway, they did this review, and it was very, very clear from the language in it that when they think about transparency of parliamentary information, they're interested in the transparency of it to people in parliament, in the room, and slightly bewildered and not particularly interested in everybody outside of that building, which we think is probably who they should be interested in. Yeah, so just kind of expanding their minds a little bit with a little bit of scraping can be good. So.
That does raise the issue of the page you put up before about Theresa Gambaro's voting.
Yeah.
How did you arrive at that, given our voting system in Parliament?
So that is just based on divisions. And I didn't even know, I assumed there would be a full record of parliamentary voting. Isn't that a no-brainer? Until that's one of the...
Probably should explain how the policy
Yeah, I will. And that is, I just think, one of the really interesting things about data journalism and civic tech, what we do, and research generally. I always find that one of the main stories is how bad the record keeping is. With that immigration detention project we did, the main story to me was basically the department doesn't have a record of what goes on in immigration detention. And I think similarly, like, we don't have a good, a comprehensive record of what happens in Parliament. Though this is the best record we have. How this works, because Parliament doesn't say the policy is we're voting now on decreasing ABC funding. I say aye. No, they actually vote on specific motions and bills. And maybe I can actually bring up They Vote For You and show you. Might be a bit easier. So. So this is all the divisions that happen in federal parliament, in both the Senate and the lower house. So you can scroll down and see them all. And how it works is the one that's edited there. What's that one? So Parliament don't provide a summary of what the votes were about, or even a good heading or anything like that. But they provide some kind of data, and we pass that into being more usable data, and lots of journalists and researchers use our feed of it. And it comes in here, and at first it says there's no summary of this vote, but then anyone can come along, and I would love if more people did this. This project's fairly new still. But Michaela, you can see at the top, who edited this, she's a part-time worker for us, and she's used to work for a parliamentary library and is a researcher into Parliament. So she writes summaries of what the vote was actually about. And in this vote, the majority agreed with the motion that the government should use Australian paper for ballot papers, blah, blah, blah. And there's the wording of the motion. And then you can see this was passed by a small majority. And here's how all the parties and individuals voted, and you can go and look at all the individuals and who was there and who wasn't there. And how this relates back to policies and the voting records is Michaela has made the assessment, and anyone can go and change this, that people, it's like Wikipedia, people who are for encouraging Australian-based industry would have voted yes, that we should make the ballot papers out of Australian paper. And so, if we now go and have a squeeze at that, there are 6 divisions related to this policy. So there's 6 votes that somebody has assessed relate to Australian-based industry. And what the site does is it compares every MP's voting pattern to those 6 divisions, how the policy was meant to vote, and then it makes this assessment whether they are strongly for, very strongly for, moderately, mixed, moderately against, strongly against, very strongly against. We're considering changing the wording of this to be very consistently and or like consistently for or consistently against, because maybe that's a bit clearer. But this is an open source project, and you can have your opinion on that and go and contribute to it. Does that kind of make sense? That's how it works. Maybe the backstory to They Vote For You. This is a fork in open source terms of one of the really early civic tech projects that was done in the UK in 2004 originally, called Public Wit. That has been running since 2004, so 12 years. That looks at Parliament and collects the votes because a few people there thought they were seeing MPs who would go out into the community and say one thing, and then they would go into Parliament and vote another way. So we forked that project and then updated it and completely changed the way it looked, and produced this. And this is actually the project I joined the Open Australia Foundation to work on. And we're going to be doing a little bit more work on it at the end of this year. We have all these projects and not many people, so we kind of move around. Late last year, though, a organisation in the Ukraine called Opora they really liked They Vote For You, and they said we should have They Vote For You for the Ukraine. So we spent a bit of time last year and actually, I'll show you, translated this for Rada For You. This is the Ukrainian They Vote For You. Which is, and so it's this open source project. I find this the most amazing story about civic tech, that it was this UK-based project and we forked it here and worked on it. Now people in the Ukraine liked it, so it's over there. Some people in Ireland are talking about working on it. And it's such for me, working on this project, dealing with a completely different parliament. There's also, they're a new democracy. There's actually a brand new parliament there in 2014, I think, 2015. And their parliament works totally different to ours. So they only have one house. They get through an enormous amount of divisions. They get through 90 a day. Every vote is recorded. They have quite a complex electronic voting system where there are like 5 different ways you can possibly vote on a single bill, which is really interesting, and there's all this kind of strategy to do with it. Yeah. So that's kind of They Vote For You and how it works a little bit. But it's a great resource. You can actually go and subscribe to a policy that you're interested in and get updates whenever there's new vote connected to it. So you can find out how Parliament's voting on ABC funding and check against your mortgage.
I think I know how ABC.
Yeah.
I might. Are there any more questions? I'm willing to entertain more questions, but I thought I'd suggest maybe. Do you want to show us the scraper? Have we got time for that? Do you want to do it, or
maybe? I feel like we've kind of gone astray.
We've gone astray, yeah.
And
that's all right.
That's good.
That's right.
Yeah.
We've still got there's some cold pizza.
There's some cold pizza and
more beer.
a few
One more
more
question?
A few more drinks.
Just the treasure hunt.
Oh, the treasure hunt. Good question.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah. Well done.
I will actually bring this up for you.
Love it.
Planning alerts. Okay, so lots of people use planning alerts. I really love. When I started at Open Australia Foundation on They Vote For You, I was like, this is the big political stuff, and planning alerts is like the tabloid popular project that everyone loves, but is less meaningful. But now I just love planning alerts. I'm really interested in local democracy, and so you find out about DA. You can then comment on that DA, and how that works is we know the emails of all these planning authorities, so all these local councils, because they have it on their site. They say, if you want to comment on this DA, email us here. So we take that email, and that gets fed into the comment form. We have the emails of most of the planning authorities in planning alerts. Brisbane City Council is the biggest council in Australia population-wise. It's a massive council. They don't publish an email address that you can email them with. They direct everyone to use this form on their website. There are lots of people who would like to email them who can't. And email is this, I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a somewhat popular service that people use to communicate with each other. And I've heard from lots of people that Brisbane City Council, and particularly their web team, are very, very nice people. They're extremely helpful. And I don't think it's a malicious, we're trying to shut down communication thing. I think, like we were talking about before, they just haven't considered, maybe people don't want to use your online form. Maybe people use email sometimes. So we would like to get the email from Brisbane City Council. If anyone knows anyone who works for Brisbane City Council, or you've ever had an email exchange with them and could send us their email, that would be fantastic.
Quote.graham.
That person just starts getting all these comments.
Just add all the media advisors.
Yeah. If you actually know someone, ask them for it. That would be fantastic.
Actually, yeah.
I called them on the phone and I was like, I'm very interested in this development application and I work on this thing and I would love to get this email address and after about 15 minutes they said, oh, we'll email you about it. We'll have a talk about it, and I've never heard anything. I think it's just one of those things where their policy is no, and they haven't quite thought about, well, you're actually locking out a huge number of people who like email and want email and things like this. So if anyone knows the email from Brisbane City Council,
Okay, cool. It's lovely to meet you. Thank you very much. All right, I'll find somebody.
No, that's all right. I should have introduced before. Couldn't make it, no worries. There's a video on YouTube which I can, if you look at the hashtags Twitter account, just on my computer, there should be a link there. Otherwise, I'll tweet out, I've recorded this one as well, and I'll tweet out a link to it tonight, and it's on the same YouTube channel. Yeah. It's probably not, the video quality isn't amazing, so it's a bit hard to see someone's slides. Yeah. things we have on board, so it's a little bit difficult to describe succinctly exactly what we do. But the way I like to describe it is we find news stories that are coming through that like news like one that could do it a bit more than like the standard treatment. You know, the text and the picture, the text and the video, and we try and do something like that. So, you know, the big ticket items are things like elections, like our time to shine, budget is big, but there's a bunch of stuff throughout the year that do something.
It is. I mean, they have like,
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, they do some great stuff. It doesn't ring a bell. One of the guys who I worked with couldn't hear his mum working at Collingwood. I used to work for APC. Yeah, yeah. As I said, yeah, yeah, that's right.
very like significant feeling. Oh yeah, I heard that. Yeah,
I think it does. Yeah, so it's really one of those kind of spread. So it's like, has other spread changed? And how they
I'd love to do those things. I'm always But if you ever have any opportunities,
You did try.
where they take 4 minutes and people always say, I moved to one side of the house. I know what they are. And then they write all of those voices.
Oh yeah, well, the exercise. Playing cards. I think there are projects like this and show on my Again, a lot of them will just be like. It's hard. A lot of that stuff by something I just really get at. I think unfortunately the time stuff like that. I mean, I think electronic voting sounds good, but we're not issuing procedure. So it kind of makes it but even if you write and you can say, well, now that's another thing. And I also think a lot of public but then if you look into it, it's like, yeah. Well, 4 years ago, apparently. I saw that. I haven't actually saw that. Yeah. I go to them occasionally. Well, I don't know. Oh, that's the thing, people don't expect that science sometimes get hacked. Statistically, very often. Probably like,
Yes. Brisbane room, which I started, you know, is basically just take like it's cool to get more Brisbane community going in there. But generally, it's a lively kind of space, and lots of data journalists hanging out there. Lots of data storytellers. And as I said, most
I have this use case for this, and
Australia and New Zealand,
just
but there's a few UK and US folks. Yeah. Right.
We sort of like, where do we want to take these trials?
It'd be awesome. There'd be people that are really interested in that. Are you work with development or something?
So there's a group called Civic,
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Right. It's kind of surprised I hadn't heard of that. I usually have my ear to the ground about it. Okay. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Maybe heaps of people are interested in that. So what do you do generally? Like you work with a few things. Okay.
yeah, and also put up issues, even if it's
Right.
just like a sentence or whatever.
I did a finance
Because that's
degree
the
there.
I am this person. Even if it's like a misconception, then we
It was only undergrad, so I kept my head down. Yeah, that's cool. Okay. So, do you have like a main PhD?
And then I went on, I was already doing it. We did so obviously do that maybe because everything kind of it's a
I've actually got an idea that's been kicking around in my head for a couple of years now. I haven't made any notes of that. Maybe which is to make a system that monitors open government data and just analyzes updated data sets, changes between the two data sets, and kind of just essentially is outside of what the statistics consider normal, just so you can kind of, like it's like an early warning heads up for stories kind of thing. That's an idea I've had for a while, but just haven't had time to activate it. most of the stuff that really interests us is political process, but great stuff. There's so many. I mean, such a need to have a think about it. It'd be ideal to have some kind of system that's really generalized, but if you just point at any data endpoint and
People's houses.
it figures out the parameters, but it does a little bit of modeling for like some sort of like yeah.
Do they write? One of the things people
Right.
no idea.
Slide on in.
And they expect it to work that way, or it's not?
First time?
No,
The hack hack?
I know you want to present. Yeah.
If you think that's wrong,
What are you
try and make. I don't know if you know
There you go. I like it. It's very simple. How people say that it's actually so simple actually. I find it much more logical than say
it's about like this little
Probably not quite sitting something like this on it, similar to the type of events here, and programs rather than sitting on website like that, he actually got the details of every single person and some stats stuff, and basically started to and you know, no, I actually looked at basically exactly data, but it's like dealing with interaction. Yeah. The Guardian one? Yeah. Like every person has ever been put. Yeah, right. That's all like, that's the kind of thing that you'd like to do. Yeah, I mean, we'd probably do that if we got to it, but whole is kind of on every data journalist solution. But, Atlas, like, it's a real insider kind of thing. Like, it doesn't necessarily serve audience in this, like, some audience like you, very obviously, really interested in that, but you're probably more interested in on the stats or an intellectual level than you are on, like, the story itself. Well, the story itself is just like one right. But, like, it's an awesome thing to have on their site, like, that's a great resource. It's kind of good point too, but, if there was a quiet movement, I would do it. But there's never a quiet movement. Right, because there's a lot of the stories that you our remit within the ABC is really cool. So, we take pictures from more information, but we also get to share our ideas as a group. And
bathroom and stuff.
I'm really interested in
I'm
saying that
yeah, I was at AX. Oh, yeah.
and so they contributed to Picture 2 more.
Yeah, so which is
and
especially with the fucking so kind of all the research and also
trying to kind of push it off like a lot of people are.
and it's great that we work with those 7 depends on the week, but there are like
And I say to them,
7
like,
people on the team, like a lot of authors, developers,
and then keep running.
some free journalists,
Nobody is like it. I'm like, it's like if you really have to use it,
so that kind of just set the skills together. Regarding programming, I work from part-time
just like go off and hit run on your straight run.
I do a lot of voicing. Oh yeah. Do a lot of ring. Learning. Learning ring. Having a glossy Napoleonic complex like ideas. But I particularly like I like what was your idea? Think not Napoleonic complex. So maybe this is delusional like there's over things for which I think programmers in my current idea you could just ask them to do the most immediate one. It's fairly prime is there, right? That's not fully defined. For which I'm learning is larger actually. But yeah, so not pretty much. I know. Again, he's anything for but I've been doing it for about a month and a half or so. Okay. So pretty new to it. I like to say it when I do it. It should be that's the thing, you know, if I go into a project and I go to journalism, like this, I won't have this, because I won't have to worry about who was 100% to it, and I will have an excuse to sit and put 100% into it. I do know people because I don't know what they call this programming, even one saying tracking, like do that 10 times a day, get no
Keep going, like, with the meetups, I think we've on a few other pretty good tech meetups that happen around. We're actually going to be running actually there was a meetup, but it didn't. So, those things that start to do it. This is the well, we did the next one. It was going to be next week, I think.
I did that.
Yeah, as I said,
I did it too the most.
I'm not trying to be rather than anything. I do yeah, like most of the time because I want to do something. I see the little bits and I guess I like it. What you say, go places, meet people.
The other thing is to say,
Dude, that's really me going to the
they go, you know, it's
there's a very large sector because it's a full-on business mega companies at this point. The world's going to have American how big that would be. Scary would be like almost as big as Roche. Not Roche. I think that's the second biggest resident. Yeah, it's a bio. The problem is that they do GMO organisms, they do alter genetically cows, crops, but everyone does. All the food you eat, unless you put it yourself in there. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's it's not at that point, and it's gonna be much bigger in the next few years.
Exactly. Because one of the things is
No, I will be. Hopefully, I can be enough. But like you're fighting something like this, if we go to technology, we can advance. As much as you like to say humans are really smart, we can advance. But you will be fighting something ethical. Not so much because of the animals, which it is now, right now. But once you start genetically altering humans, which some say that's incredible, with some organs that start to be
good thing to do.
you're gonna have a huge thing. You're gonna have something like Quasi-Gattaca. Have you seen the movie Gattaca? Yeah, something like that. It's a really good movie, but super realistic way to see it. Because how I see it, you have the potential to create a second-class citizen. It's gonna be everyone that's not wealthy enough to genetically alter a citizen. And you can alter people genetically once they're adults with genetic therapy. So you have to alter isomatic cells in the gene. When you alter when someone's born, and even before they're born,
This is really good.
that's easy. It's malleable. And that's when they receive information to make everything. Once they made everything,
Yeah, these guys are great. This is political.
Yeah, I know. I loved him.
and they just do what they do.
Well, he lived here, like. What's he doing now? Yeah, well, they lost.
Oh, you can already modify the genetics. So
I'm pretty sure.
huge things, in my mind at least.
Yeah,
I've never met him.
Oh, no, yeah. He used to run
Probably
back camps, which is the Humanities and Technology conference. And I remember
you can
him running here.
you can copy a sector.
So there's a colleague of mine at ANU who works in the space. Another one that used to be at UQ is now over in the UK.
That's because of
But essentially what it is it's a project to code political speeches and other kind of data in a consistent format, right? So it's the idea of like a coding
funny if we have racism
system
for like green people.
for looking at,
no, but that's
so this is the master topics code, right? So this is like, what you've got is, for example, the code book.
But the problem with this one
you
is at the moment,
take every major topic code, so is this referring to macroeconomics, civil rights, health, agriculture, right? Within each of these, they break military, yeah, well within it,
intellectual property laws being really strong. But to the moment,
right, so that, yeah, you've got arms control, nuclear, military aid, weapons sales.
it's like you make a chair, right?
Yeah, so it's a taxonomy, right? And so what it is that they've developed, and they've spent a lot of time across the lots of institutions developing this very comprehensive taxonomy. I did some work with Lexamancer to actually see how accurate could you take an existing, like something that had been coded manually, run it through Lexamancer and see what topics emerge from Lexamancer and how accurately they align between the two of them. So what concepts from Lexamancer align with these particular codes. I actually got about above 95% accuracy for it. It's pretty bloody good, right? So yeah, and there's other people who've done similar ones with similar results. So it's actually, I mean, these codes are actually fairly well defined.
I think like every one of those some topics could be a policy in the review, and you could have it just for starters, and then the next step
Exactly,
is
that's what I'm
the
showing it
interface
to you.
says, like, is this policy, like, looks like this debate might be about this policy.
Or wearing my Lexamus pad, you don't even need that, you can just put it through Lexamus, and
Exactly.
then you can use it to automatically, and then when new topics emerge, new policies
They
emerge,
can
they're
come
already
up.
there. You just have to get someone to think of them.
That's it. But within this, you've got, there's a whole bunch of stuff from the UK, from the US, and there's also some Australian data that's being coded in this way. So you've got things like State of the Union speeches, Supreme Court cases, and there's a whole one that exists for, I think it's only for website, Policy Project UK.
Work out, man. You're not
Can I
getting that.
meet Michaela, who actually is in Brisbane most of the time, and she does all the research into the review and the different things that policies.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so this is Policy Genetics in British Politics, right? So they've done it over there as
I
well.
wonder if that,
Yeah, Will
I'd be
Jennings is one.
fascinated to know if they looked into public record, the original review.
Perhaps. Yeah, but no, these guys have done this with all the British, so they've got their code book there as well. But the data sets they've used is things like the Queen's Address and others from there. Speeches from the throne, acts of parliament, bills and hearings, budgets, questions, public issue priorities, media, planning manifestos, the whole work. So yeah, there is interest from an academic space in some of this stuff being there, so it can be consistently applied. Because the issue that political science scholars were having was that people were coding their data differently, they were using different kinds of data, they were going for a lot of effort, spending a lot of money on actually doing a lot of.
I used to work in semantics,
Naturally,
and
yeah.
just the whole issue is everyone used different apologies, and you couldn't make it up to you.
Right? I think it's going to come back.
Oh yeah, that's another. Yeah.
So much in a bit is lack of point of view. Then again, most of what I say is kind of naive. Video people, but it's pointing that their whole life is just spent solving that. Now I'm just saying, the little people using so many years of their life having spent, and that's the result they have. You're not even happy, man. But yeah, it's a
Brilliant.
That was fantastic.
Yeah, it turned out well, didn't it? Yeah. I think I counted like 32 people, something like that, which is kind of average off the RSVPs. I thought if there was like 56, including the Eventbrite ones, it was close to 60. So I would have expected a few more people.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, we should know that. I think keep a close eye on that, like how many people are RSVPing versus how many are actually coming.
Yeah.
And whether who was it? Was it those guys were saying when they actually charged the price for admission? That might have been another conversation I was having.
No, yeah, that's 4101 was saying that. Yeah.
People actually rock up.
Janine, I think, was saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, man.
It is a funny thing, isn't it?
Like, in terms of professional development, this stuff is just, it's gold.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, jeez.
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, why wouldn't you, right? It's just, yeah. Come on.
Alright, stop recording.
I feel like that, actually.